Hello and welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports. And we're going to continue our whip around Major League Baseball, covering the teams and giving outlooks for what to expect this season. Next up is the American League Central Division. Tim, are you ready to go?
Let's run it.
Let's start on the south side with the Chicago White Sox. They have maybe the biggest range of ceiling to floor as any team in Major League Baseball. Because if you look at the talent around the lineup, and in the rotation and in the bullpen, just like roster in general, it's there. And if it all comes together, you can pretty much like get them a wild card run or even a division title because that is their ceiling. They did it 2 seasons ago when they won the AL Central. But the problem is just like there's so many questions on this team that need to be answered, especially in terms of like durability with guys like Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez. Tim Anderson is, at least for the time being, out. That bullpen is kind of a mess for now until Liam Hendricks comes back, and the starting rotation hasn't quite performed up to standards with duds from Lance Lynn and Lucas Giolito thus far. Dylan Cease has been awesome, as we expected him to be, but if the rest of the team can carry their weight, there could be some magical things in the South Side, but I don't know.
They've got, like you said, they have so much talent just overall on their roster, but they have been a team over the past like 3 or 4 years who have just continued to get more and more talent, but continue to get snake bitten by injuries to different guys. Obviously, with Tim Anderson being out right now, obviously they want to get him back as soon as possible. Liam Hendricks is going to be huge. Hopefully, he comes back without any complications, and we'd love to see him back on that team. But they have talent all over the place. It's just a matter of not only putting it all together, but getting and keeping all of those guys healthy. Because that's what snake bitten them over the last couple of years. If you can keep their core healthy over the course of this year and in the next couple, they can potentially build something pretty special. But they've really got to solve whatever injury bug that plagues this organization right now.
It's all about staying healthy and making the pieces work. Next, we're going to take a trip to the land of the Cuyahoga and take a look at the Guardians. They were one of the big surprises of last year, winning the AL Central, winning 92 ball games, and even winning a wild card series. Their weakness last year was their offense. They went out and dressed it with guys like Josh Bell and Mike Zunino. Their pitching is still pretty strong, but they have been rattled by injuries to that rotation, especially with guys like Tristan McKenzie and Aaron Savali missing time. That forces your back end rotation guys into bigger roles, and guys like Hunter Gaddis, who were previously just prospects, into big innings and forcing them to be inning eaters. But the thing that is special about this Cleveland Guardians team is their bullpen. They have a two-headed monster at the back end with James Karinchak and Emmanuel Clase that is better than any in baseball. I'll put him up against any setup closer duo in baseball, and I don't think you can find me a better one, especially James Karinchak. I love the way he pitches. He's so wild. He's so all over the place. He's so outspoken. He loves celebrating, and it's so fun to watch. Do I think last year was sort of like the new normal for Cleveland? No, I think there's going to be a bit of
Yeah.
regression to the mean, but I think this Guardians team is going to be competitive in 2023.
They definitely still have the talent to be competitive. Like you said, about their offensive weakness, despite the additions they made, that still kind of holds to be true. They haven't really found a whole lot on the offensive side of the ball, even to start this season. And their pitching, obviously, those injuries are brutal for them, but that bullpen is super, super strong. The question for them is going to be how well can they keep their guys healthy and figure out things on the offensive side of the ball to put up runs, to put those closers in a situation to win. Because if you don't give them the opportunity, to get that save or to get that win in these games, then it doesn't do them any good. So they have to do their work early, and that's going to be essentially a big part of whether or not they exceed expectations and have a similar season like last year, or if they end up sort of around that 500 range.
But the one thing that Cleveland does have is one of the best managers in the game in Tito Francona. He'll get those guys right, and they'll get them competing. But a team that absolutely won't compete in any capacity, an absolute dumpster fire of an organization, the Detroit Tigers.
Go
They
Tigers.
were a disappointment last year, and they're going to continue to be a disappointment this year, especially considering with like the contracts that you have, just looking around the roster. Like you'll play out Miggy's last year as a Tiger, and then he'll ride off into the sunset. And then what
I'm
you
gonna be honest, it won't be
have,
much of a sunset to write off, and given what we expect from this season.
yeah, I mean, you have Javier Baez leading the Detroit Tigers into we don't
Into
know
where?
where. Yeah, into where? Maybe the basement of the AL Central. The thing about
They
Detroit,
certainly are digging themselves a hole with the contracts they signed, especially his.
yeah, they need to get their young arms healthy, especially Tarek Skubal, who showed flashes of being an ace last year, and Casey Mize, who is a former top pick. Those two guys are going to be big. Eduardo Rodriguez, not an ace. Matt Boyd can be a cheap option. That can be a nice surprise. I like what Matt Boyd has brought to the table so far, but nothing about the Tigers, their past, present, or future screams winning baseball. It just doesn't.
I just think this organization needs a revitalization in some way, shape, or form. The path that they've gone down, for the last couple of years in an attempt. I mean, I guess you could say that Javi Baez contract was an attempt to sort of like a win now
An
mentality.
attempt.
Yes, but an attempt was all it was, because it really has gotten them nowhere. Like you said, those young arms are good for trying to build that future. But they need to, after this year, get past the Miggy Cabrera era, start focusing on your young core. And as poor as they've played, I would say truly commit to a true rebuild. I would think would be in their best interest with some of the young guys they have. But up until then, until they make a decision like that, I don't see much happening for them.
I mean, you can try to rebuild and offload these contracts and offload anything of value,
The problem
but
is with this
there's
the contracts they signed with Baez. I don't even know if anyone would
well,
would take that given
even
the way
with their
he's been
young
playing.
guys, there's
Yeah.
really not much to bank on. And just to add insult to injury with Javier Baez, because I haven't liked him for a long, long time. He is hitting a splendid 111 to start the
Oh,
season in 10 games and 36 at bats. That would
oh my
be
goodness.
4 hits. So what a great start
Wow.
to the year for Sir Javi and the Motown Tigers indeed. The next team we have to cover is the Kansas City Royals. They, like Detroit, were in the basement of the AL Central last year, but the difference is they made moves and they have young guys that you can actually bank on to become
I would
something.
consider them to be on the up.
Considering you have like guys like Bobby Witt, Vinny Pasquantino, MJ Melendez, young, good bats in your lineup that you can build around. Zach Greinke being a Royal, I hope he pitches until forever because he is just a joy to watch. Brady Singer is not terrible behind him either. Other than that, they don't have much in terms of starting pitching. That's something that they're really going to need to work on. Hopefully, one of their young prospects can be called up and become something. But then they went out and signed Aroldis Chapman, and
He's
he's
always a
been
firecracker for your team.
he's been interesting to watch to start the young season. The thing about Aroldis is that last year he was like his velocity was strangely down to like 95, 96, 97, but now he's back up to like 102 to 104 and he's back to the all-star kind of
Who
closer that
knows
we know
what
he
who
is.
knows
So
what changes he made, but he's
he
back
made
up.
he made the adjustments. Are the Royals going to be competitive by any means? Not really, but they'll give teams tough times in series and they have something that they can build around. The last team we have to cover in the AL Central is the Minnesota Twins. And they've been looking to build and compete and build something sustainable and build a winner for years. But then they made a few moves and they're actually starting to come together in the Twin Cities. Because you get Carlos Correa back after both the failed signings with the Giants and the Mets.
That was a
So
wild ride.
so they luck in there and then they turn around and say, hey, we need more pitching. So they trade the AL batting champion to Miami for Pablo Lopez, who has turned into an ace. And that trade is now suddenly looking like a win-win for both sides because Luis
And
Ariz is also tearing it up over in Miami.
just hit the cycle, by the way.
Yes, he did. First time in Miami Marlins history. But
Pretty cool.
the Twins are going to be banking on their pitching, which I've said is criminally underrated in the past, especially with Pablo Lopez. I'm a huge Sonny Gray fan. I can't get enough of Sonny Gray, and he's had a really hot start to the season. Joe Ryan had a good year last year, and getting Kenta Maeda back, who, if we remember just a few years ago, got major Cy Young consideration with the Twins. And let's not forget Joan Duran, who is an absolute alien coming out in the ninth. He's got 100+ mile an hour fastballs, high 90s splitters, and an exploding slide. It's insane to watch Yohan
Terrifying.
Duran do his thing. But the Twins should be towards the top of this division.
I completely agree because I mean, in terms of baseball considerations, I always find a good pitching rotation, both starters and closers, to be really important, and they have that. I think they have the bats at different points where they can catch fire and have some good performances. So if you have that foundation of pitching to go off of, I think you're in a pretty good spot. And the Twins do have that with all those guys you mentioned starting, and then Duran as a closer. They really have a lot of pieces to go around in this team. The trades that they made, in the acquisitions in general, have worked out well for them. So it's kind of just a matter of whether or not they can catch fire and find that spark to try to hold on to for the course of the season. But they're going to definitely be a team to follow. I think they're definitely a team that's going to be on the up and up as the season goes on.
That's all we got for our AL Central season outlook. We'll have videos on both the AL East and the NL East. So if you haven't watched those, go watch them. We'll have other baseball stuff coming on the channel. We've done college basketball, NFL, and so much more content here on Running the Table. But if you want more from us, like and subscribe. And until next time, we out.
Vinny Pasquantino literally cannot be real. I refuse to believe that name is a real person.